Well, hello and welcome to the first episode of Thought Club with myself, Sats Solanki, and thanks for joining me on this journey of, I guess, just a brand new podcast. Also on YouTube, if you're watching, hey, thanks for doing that. Hit subscribe. And yeah, really excited to go on this journey as we just explore a range of topics. Some of these episodes will be me just talking, which I love doing. And some of these will be conversations with other people, but I think what I really wanted to do is just bring a perspective of nuance into some of these big conversations that are happening in our society right now. I mean, gosh, there's so much going on. And today's episode really, we're gonna talk about the vaccine for COVID. So title is to vax or not to vax? That really is the question, and it's a much deeper question than it seems on the surface. Before we go any further, let me just say really quickly that I have been vaccinated, at least one dose of vaccination, and I'm en route or coming up to an appointment to get my second vaccination. And I remember Owen McManus said in a sort of similar conversation on the Battle Ready podcast, he said one of the reasons there was a whole myriad of conversation and factors. One of the reasons he was getting the vaccination was so that he could speak into this kind of cultural issue in our society, and that really helped me because I've been very on the fence with what I do in terms of the vaccine, and I believe in medicine and science, and all these kind of things are generally good things that we should take advantage of. Right now, we're taking advantage of technology to communicate, and what he said is that one of the reasons he took the vaccine was so that he could speak into this whole conversation without being kind of just branded as a kind of anti-vaxxer, conspiracy theorist sort of thing. And I think quite often, because we live in a world that is polarized and wants to be polarized, it's easier to demonize others than it is to actually have a conversation. I think it's part of my reasoning definitely in thinking, no, I'm getting vaccinated, because I actually want to have a conversation about what that means. So I think the vaccine is a matter of personal choice. And the reason it's a matter of personal choice is because we're in danger of, when we tell people what to do, it's not just about the instance in itself. For example, the argument may be, which I think is a fair one, hey, let's get vaccinated so we can protect people and, kind of minimize the effects of COVID. And that, on the face of it, seems like quite a logical thing to do. I don't know about you, without reading too much into the inner workings of the deep state and conspiracy, it just seems like a fairly reasonable thought pattern for any human being who has any sense of just, I care about other people. I think the issue is not about the specific issue of the vaccine. The issue is, and maybe what we can lean into now, is what precedent does that set for the future? And really being that can the government make a decision on your behalf what happens in regards to your body, in regards to your decisions, your immediate environment. We live in a society, we interact with other people, so clearly there are laws and restrictions on what we can and cannot do. But I think there is some sort of divine line, if you like, around our autonomy that says, hey, we in our democracy believe that we should have the free will, the autonomy to decide what happens in regards to our body. On the face of it, we're talking about, an injection into someone's arm that is going to go into their body. And personally for me, I've come to the conclusion that I'm fine with it. I'm the sort of person who naturally leans towards, I never take painkillers. I always try and just kind of push through, because I do believe that the body, the immune system, is the best form of defense. And one of the best things we can do is strengthen ourselves. And I've always got this just funny thing around painkillers where I'm like, if I take painkillers and of the pain, then almost I'm going to ignore and forget maybe some of the reasons that I've ended up being in a place of pain, whether that's working too hard, whether that's not drinking enough water, whether that's not getting enough sleep. And so part of me thinks, no, I want to make sure that I'm not just numbing pain, but I kind of push through. And so when it comes to the vaccine, you know, on the factual side of it, I mean, for young people, this really isn't a big concern on a personal level. COVID is very, 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 very unlikely to take you out. It's not. And so I think if you look at the stats, and you can spend all manner of time looking at them, but I just think on the face of it, for a young person like myself, it's not a huge issue. And so I was feeling fairly chilled out about the idea of getting the vaccine. Do I want to really put something additional into my body where I would just prefer to kind of just let nature take its course and me to just kind of, I don't know, like, it just kind of feels unnecessary. And then there was this whole conversation around, you know, what does it mean in terms of travel? What does it mean in terms of workplaces? And there is a whole conversation right now in various countries about can the government mandate, and I think they are doing in some places, mandating the vaccine. And that for me is a massive question, because whilst I have been vaxxed, I'm not sure that we should set the precedent of vaccinating people who don't want to be vaccinated. In other words, forcing them. And here's the really interesting thing, because you might be listening to this thinking, well, it is such a no-brainer and it's for public health, therefore we have to do it. People don't have a choice. And I think that's a really interesting thought, because there are a lot of issues in our world that people have very strong opinions on. And what you find is that people will have, on the issue that matters to them, quite often we lean into that kind of totalitarian sort of thinking. And I know I do this sometimes as well, as I'm sure you do. It's a human trait that on an issue that really matters to us, we say we absolutely must. You know, there can be no options here. And we lean into, I'm not talking about punishing crime. That's, I think everybody agrees that's a good idea. But I'm talking about almost like Minority Report. You know, a murder's about to happen, therefore we should prevent it from happening, even though no one's actually committed any crimes. Or the possibility of a crime taking place. The possibility of harm being done. And so I suppose the argument around the vaccine is, well, if you don't get the vaccine, you could be indirectly causing harm to myself or another person, therefore you have to do it. And I think we cross from a boundary of real, literal threat to potential threat. And I think when we make decisions, legal decisions, based on potential threat, potential injury, we really are opening up a can of worms that is a terrible precedent for the future, because who decides what is a potential threat? You know, we've seen this move in culture towards the idea that language is violence. You know, if someone says something, and of course there are things that are, you know, false, libel, all legal terms to describe stuff that is actually across slander that crosses into a legal framework, but a simple sort of offense or stuff that makes us feel uncomfortable, talking about ideas that challenge us, big conversations around biology right now, big conversations in our society on so many different topics. I think when we move into a space where we say we can't talk about that, or we have to prevent certain things from happening, it's quite a dangerous precedent. And I've realized that every single one of us have an issue that we would back in favor of a totalitarian decision, whether it's racism, whether it's crime, whether it's just stuff that is all bad stuff, right? That we would go, there needs to be a strong response here, and so strong that it should kind of overall, if you like, that individual's free will. I think the point that we get to there, we're in quite a dangerous place. And the reason is because whilst it might be good for that particular issue, the thing that comes to mind is just around all the Euros, all the racist abuse on social media, just all that horrible stuff. But it's been really interesting to see the conversation of what does that mean in terms of social media, in terms of all those things. And the problem is that the more extreme responses, although they feel pretty valid, open up a can of worms in terms of what that would set for future generations. What does that set for countries that have corrupt governments if people have to have, let's say an ID to sign up for social media? It opens up power to the wrong people or exposes just weaknesses in the future. And so it's such a difficult tension because it feels like it would be so easy to just stamp out certain issues in our society with a totalitarian approach. And yet, always, every single time in human history where people have lent into that on a governmental level or in a societal level, it leads to a lot of people dying. And we just look at recent history, ancient history, to see that that's actually true. And so I suppose just my thought for us is can we be people who can disagree and have an opinion and have a perspective, and that's okay. Vaccines, not vaccines. Like there are multiple reasons why people don't want to get vaccinated. One is a little bit like what I said earlier, like people don't feel that they really want to put something in their body when they don't necessarily need it. Whether you feel that's true or not, that's the perspective of some people. And I think that's a valid thought. Do you have to get something injected into your blood, I imagine? Like, if you don't. The other one is there's moral implications. I don't know the science well enough, but what I do know is that there are links between aborted cell lines, which I think is different than aborted cells directly, that are used in the vaccine. That's a huge moral, ethical dilemma, question one I have thought about as well. My conclusion personally was that I suspect that those sort of things are used in a lot of things in our society, that if I was to start actually doing that, I wouldn't be able to function in society if I was to draw a line so black and white. And so that's been my personal conviction. But I actually totally understand if somebody who was not comfortable with that, did not want to get the vaccine on those reasons. I think that's actually a fair thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, can we be the sort of people who can accept another viewpoint? Because when we want to bring in more totalitarianism, more governmental power, more decision-making at a higher level, we're actually going to make our world a bit of a worse place. And we need that tension where people have free will, and yet there are laws to protect people. And what you find in that space is you never have a perfect world. And the reason you don't have a perfect world is because of sin. It's because people are broken and they are breaking stuff. And we are just struggling with that idea in our society right now. And so we think if we can just put in some rules, we'll fix everything. We're not very self-aware if we think that's how it works. So hey, thanks for tuning in for this episode of Thought Club. My encouragement to us is let's keep being people who learn and have conversation and think about these things. And we can disagree, but it doesn't mean the other person's a bad person. It just means they're coming from a different space. And that's okay. Let's have some more conversations. Thanks for tuning in today. Make sure you hit subscribe, YouTube, podcast, all of that jazz. You can follow me at Sats Solanki on Instagram and other social media channels like TikTok and the like. Drop me a DM, let me know how you're enjoying this so far, and we'll see you soon.